Hello everyone, welcome to Psychology 346, Social Psychology, and today we're going to be talking about group processes. So within social psychology, we study how people are interacting with each other, but people tend to form groups with one another. These are entities that consist of two or more people that can influence each other. We form many different types of groups over our lifetime. They range from more intimate groups to task groups, social categories, people clusters. And each of these groups get kind of less and less groupy or entative, which we'll talk about in just a second, as we get further away from these intimacy groups. One way of kind of determining the groupiness of a group is through what's called entitativity. This is, the more entitative a group is, the more we see it as a meaningful social entity. We perceive that that group has more groupiness, the more entitative it is. Groups with higher entitativity have more similar values and they hold shared values, and they generally share a common fate. So groups that we might see as more cohesive or as one, say like the United States military or Marines, may be seen as more entitative than, say, a group of people standing outside of a supermarket waiting to get in as it opens every morning. So we form groups for many reasons, but two primary reasons. One, to have a sense of belonging, to feel some kind of social connection with other people. And two, in order to achieve goals. Forming groups with others can help us attain goals and help us more easily attain these goals. One way forming groups helps us achieve goals is through what's known as social facilitation. And we see that people tend to perform better on tasks when others are around them, but only tasks that are well learned or dominant. So if a person's really good at shooting free throws, for example, if we put them in a crowded room with a bunch of people, they tend to perform better. If a person's not good at shooting free throws, if we put them in a crowded room with a lot of people, they're actually going to tend to perform worse. So the dominant behavior or dominant response tends to be accentuated with the presence of other people. So on what type of tasks might groups be more effective than individuals? Well, groups tend to be better on additive tasks. That's in which each member performs the same behavior or has the same duty and the contributions are summed. So a group of people would be better at tug of war than one person. Groups are better at disjunctive tasks. That's when the group output is selected from, say, one member of a group. So the best unique contribution would be most effective. So, for example, answering quiz questions would be better in a group setting than an individual setting. That way, if you don't happen to know the answer, maybe someone else in the group does. And groups can also be better at conjunctive tasks. This is when situations where the group will only succeed unless all members of the group finish. So this encourages the weakest members to also contribute. It can be a good way of motivating people to perform specific behaviors because they know that other people are relying on them. These social bonds, social connections can motivate people to perform in specific ways. But conjunctive tasks especially raise the issue that some people might want to take advantage of groups. And we see two main ways in which people can take advantage of groups. One is social loafing. That's where I'm sure all of you experienced or witnessed social loafing at one point. If you have a group project to do in class, there's always that one member who doesn't really pull their own weight. And we tend to see that people work harder alone than they do when they're in a group. We can even see that certain individuals may not put forth any effort because they know that other people are going to be putting up the slack. There's a diffusion of responsibility where the presence of others makes yourself less responsible for an outcome. There's little to no accountability involved. We can also see social loafing arise when not everyone is being evaluated. So if people are aware that they're going to be evaluated for their individual contributions within the group, this is also known as evaluation apprehension, then we see social loafing and diffusion of responsibility reduce. People put forth more effort, even in groups, when they know they're being watched and when they know that in some way, shape, or form, their individual output is going to be judged. We can also see people take advantage of groups through what's known as de-individuation. This is when people form groups, especially when people are kind of submerged into crowds of people, their inhibitions are reduced, their constraints on behavior are reduced, and people tend to perform more impulsive behaviors and more deviant behaviors as a result. This can lead to some very violent, aggressive, negatively valent behaviors, such as mob violence or mass hysteria. And the primary driver of de-individuation is anonymity. Think about the internet. Think about how much hateful rhetoric you see on the internet because there's a veil of anonymity involved. People are not individualized on the internet. They may use a username or a tag or whatever, but their individual names are oftentimes not being placed in the forefront. This is why a lot of websites are using Facebook integration in their comments sections of videos, articles, etc., because then people's actual real names are attached to their comments, not pseudonyms. And people are less likely to post hateful information if their individual identity is attached to it. We see de-individuation increase, again, if people are anonymous, if people have less responsibility within the group or crowd. The more aroused people are, the more exciting a situation might be, and the larger the group. So you may see some pretty nasty behaviors in crowds at sporting events because oftentimes this kind of fits all four of those different criteria. What happens when we are de-individuated? Well, again, we see more spontaneous behaviors, more deviant behaviors. People tend to be less concerned with how other people think of them. People tend to lose track of time and context. But people do feel connected to the group, more connected, because it's not, again, we're not focusing on personal identity, we're focusing on group identity. And when people become de-individuated, their own identity is the group. It's not them. They're acting as basically an arm of the group. Interestingly, we can also see positive behaviors sometimes occur, or at least positively valence behaviors when people feel de-individuated. A really interesting study known as the In the Darkened study by Gergen and his colleagues placed 8 strangers in a room and told them that there were no rules as to what they did in the room. They were placed in there for about an hour, and they were escorted into the room and then out of the room individually in a way where they didn't meet beforehand and they couldn't meet afterwards. So people interacted in this room and then they knew that they were never going to see these other people again. But the trick here is that for one condition, it was a normal room. The room was lit as you would expect. But for the other condition, the room was completely black, completely pitch black. They couldn't see anything in there. No light was in there at all, so you couldn't see any figures. It was just 8 people in a completely dark room with strangers doing whatever they wanted. What the researchers found was that we saw initially a little bit of talking at first in the dark room. So in the lit room, you saw just basically a steady stream of talking, as you would expect, people interacting with each other in a normal situation. In the dark room, we saw some intermittent talking, and then the talking basically stopped, and we saw a lot of nonverbal communication. So a lot of purposeful touching, a lot of hugging, and at least afterwards, a lot of reporting of feeling sexually aroused. So people kind of explored their environments knowing that they were completely anonymous, that they wouldn't be identified in a very sexual way in this very dark room. And everyone reported afterwards enjoying their experience in the room. So that's one example, at least, of some positively valence behaviors coming from de-individuation. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.